Welcome to Press Coverage. I'm Theo Gremminger, and at Press Coverage, I want to help you find the edges that you need to win in fantasy, and I want to bring on the sharpest guests that I can all offseason long, get you ready to crush it in 2024. And today, I'm happy to be joined by Dave Kluge. Dave Kluge from Football Guys came on First Class Fantasy with me, but this is your first time here on Press Coverage. Welcome to you today, Dave. Great to have you here.
Yeah, this is my first time on press coverage. I feel like I've been on a lot of player profiler shows at this point. I do the annual Mind a Mansion episode with Matt. I've done first class fantasy. Now I'm on press coverage. Hopefully we could do the Dynasty show at some point as well. Always a big fan of what you guys are doing over at Player Profiler, so always happy to support it.
Yeah, you as well. And why don't you let everybody know about the show that you're dropping with Alfredo Brown?
Yeah, so we're actually making a new YouTube channel. Theo, you and I talked about this a little bit pre-show, but we kind of realized that, having all of our shows, the Audible and the Dynasty show and the Fantasy Football show and our Best Ball live streams, we were putting them all out on the same channel. Realized we were kind of capping ourselves a little bit by having this very divided audience. So now we have split it up. You can go to youtube.com/at Football Guys Fantasy, and that's where you can see Alfredo and I bringing our show multiple times a week. I also do my Friday morning Best Ball live stream there as well. And then you can also find the other new channel, which is at Football Guys Dynasty. Jeff Bell and Jagger May, they're doing their show there. I was lucky enough to actually join as a guest just last week, kind of talking about the running back landscape and market in Dynasty. We kind of went through all of our tiers and rankings, really just kind of picking apart all of the running backs. So that was a fun episode. So yeah, lots of new things coming at Football Guys now that we've split up on 3 separate channels. It just gives them us even a little bit more room to breathe, and we'll be promoting even more content out there. So follow me on Twitter at Dave Kluge, and you can see everything we're doing on those channels.
Yeah, and Sigmund Bloom came on press coverage a couple weeks ago, actually before the NFL draft. That was awesome. So big shout out to what you guys do. Jeff Bell, Dynasty Life, and yeah, Jagger May, really, really good as well. So you guys are crushing it. Highly recommend your work. And I really enjoy the show that you do with Alfredo, though. It's easy to watch. It's actionable information. And you guys, you guys podcast together a lot, and you can tell it's easy to watch. So keep on crushing with that one. But
Thank you.
we're recording this on Friday, so we got to talk a little bit about this. Is not a everybody watching this is probably like, oh no, another schedule release show. Today's show is about breakout players. We're going to talk about players that we think are going to have really big seasons this year, crush their ADP, and also for some of the veteran players, post their best fantasy season ever. But first, we got to talk a little bit about the schedule because it's very new. What game gets you most excited about? Like, everybody's got their favorite game, the game that they're circling. Like, this is a game I'm really, really hyped for.
Yeah, I mean, this Week 17 schedule, which is what we're looking for, especially when we're playing best ball this time of year, trying to get that Week 17 correlation. The Week 17 schedule is a letdown. I mean, I'm really kind of upset with the way that things fell. Like, in the early drafts I was doing, I was so excited to get Mahomes and Kelsey at the 3-4 turn. I was smashing those two almost every opportunity I could. And then all of a sudden I find out that they play Christmas morning outdoors against Pittsburgh. Like, that's just absolutely terrible. Like, the worst case scenario. So the only game that really kind of piques my interest is Detroit at San Francisco. It's going to be a Monday Night Football game. It's going to be relatively warm, a rematch from what I think was like the best postseason game last year. That was just an amazing game to watch. And it kind of works out when you're drafting these best ball teams where it's really easy to stack the best players from both of those teams. I've started off a lot of drafts where I'm getting Amon-Ra St. Brown in the middle of the first. And then when you get to the middle of the second round, Brandon Ayuk's there. If he's not there in the middle of the third round, you can get Deebo Samuel. And these are just two offenses outside of this game alone that I think are going to be very good offenses that I'm trying to target aggressively. The fact that they play against each other outdoors in San Francisco is just an added benefit. Green Bay, Minnesota, that's another one. I really like the Green Bay offense. There's just so many options there, and I don't know how it's going to work out. Maybe Christian Watson bounces back, but if he doesn't, I really like Jaden Reed. I really like Dontavian Wicks. I even like Bo Melton as kind of a round 18 dart throw. They've got 2 good tight ends as well. So that being an indoor game against a bad Minnesota offense, that gets me even more excited than I already was about Green Bay. But like we said, man, Dallas playing in Philadelphia, it's going to be cold. It's going to be outdoors. Like, not too excited about that one. Kansas City and Pittsburgh, not too excited about that. Baltimore and Houston, 2 great offenses. that are going to be playing on a Wednesday on a super short week. So all the games that like we should be excited about, we can just find reasons not to be.
Yeah, I agree with you. The weather concerns, like people don't like talking about that, but it's always in the back of my mind when you look at that week 17, what a letdown that would be to have a significant amount of money on the line. And it's like a really bad environment, 17-10 type environment.
Ugh.
I'll throw out the Arizona LA game. A
Yeah.
lot of times those are not as high scoring as we'd like, but in the division. But I think that game could pop off, and I think that Washington Atlanta game, that's sneaky because we'll have
Mhm.
Jaden Daniels deep in the year. There's spoiler alert. We might talk about a couple guys from Washington Atlanta later in the show, but the evergreen question that I got to ask you: you put a lot of time into your process. You're writing articles, you're podcasting, and at Football Guys, you guys are continually trying to have very tight, actionable rankings. If you could know the final stats of any rookie in this 2024 class, who would it be for specifically for this year?
This is a good question, and this one really kind of has me thinking because there's a lot of guys I wish I could know about, but if I had to pick one, I kind of thought about this question like who has potentially the widest range of outcomes, and I think that's Keon Coleman. So he's a guy that I think if you find out kind of what Keon Coleman is going to do in this offense, then it kind of creates a waterfall effect of how everybody else is going to do in this offense as well. So I think he's the guy that I would want to know because he landed in a great spot. Like there's no other way to look at it. Like this is what we wanted to see is one of these receivers landing in Buffalo, tied to Josh Allen after Stephon Diggs vacated that role. But a lot of times, like he's a guy that I'm not too crazy about as a prospect. These guys that are winning on catch point abilities and jump balls and contested catches. We've seen those guys have really dangerous floors as well. So, you're talking from a range of outcome standpoint here. If he puts it all together and he ends up being that guy and his kind of backyard style meshes with what Josh Allen does, it's not out of the question that he'd be a top 10 fantasy wide receiver this year. But of course, he could also be this year's Quentin Johnston, where he's just too unrefined for the NFL and we don't get anything from him at all. So I'd like to know his stats because where he's getting drafted right now, it's really tough for me to pull the trigger. Like I understand the upside is there, but he has so many red flags of being a potential bust. And if we know his stats, then we can kind of project out how Dalton Kincaid's going to look and how Khalil Shakir is going to look. So I think that knowing Keon Coleman and what he's going to bring to this offense would really help me sleep better at night.
Yeah, I love the Coleman answer, and a couple people are sort of on this one because the opportunity to get the alpha wide receiver in a Josh Allen-led offense has sort of been gold. Even before like Stephon Diggs got there, we had that year with like John Brown and Cole
Mhm.
Beasley being like flex worthy. Obviously, Stephon Diggs crushed it. So many vacated targets this year with Gabe Davis and Diggs gone, as well as the offense sort of changing. Last year, Kincaid, this year Coleman, sort of a youth movement at the receiver spot. But he's like a range of outcomes guy. He could have 80 targets. He could have 130 targets. We just don't know how this offense is going to flow. But if he gets in that 120 target range with his profile, his potential in the red zone, you're right. I think he's definitely a fun one. How about the same question, but a veteran, a non-rookie, somebody you'd love to know their final stats this year?
These questions, like, I don't know if I just think about them too hard, but like, it's really tough for me to answer these questions because
Thought-provoking
like, there's so
questions
many
on
guys.
press coverage. We're
They are
thought-provoking.
very thought-provoking questions, and maybe I copped out here because I went with the Chicago Bear, but I feel like the Chicago Bears right now, they have such an ambiguous situation in this wide receiver room. So if I had to pick one guy, I think so much of the projections for the Chicago Bears kind of hinge on what Keenan Allen is able to do. I think if I saw that Keenan Allen, this year was going to go for 1,200 yards and 12 touchdowns, that would tell me that Caleb Williams is going to pay off at his ADP. And that would tell me that things are all going to kind of fall in place for this passing attack. On the flip side, if I see that, Keenan Allen's maybe only having 300 yards, I'm anticipating that Roma Dunze is going to step up, or maybe I'm a little bit wary of Caleb Williams and where he's getting drafted. So I think if there was one guy, a veteran, whose stat line I'd like to know, it would be Keenan Allen, just because then it would give us, just knowing whether he hits or not in this offense, it would help us kind of fill in the blanks for the rest of the Chicago Bears offense.
Yeah, I think using it's not just so if anybody doesn't know, Dave, you're a Chicago guy. So it's not just a homer call, because Chicago does have so many guys steamed up. Caleb Williams is QB 11 right now on Underdog, and I think that's a great price for a guy with his sort of ceiling. And then they have the 3 pass catchers all steamed up. Rome Odunze now is wide receiver 40-ish, but Keenan Allen like wide receiver 30-ish. And then DJ Moore, of course, is a mid wide receiver 2, which could turn out to be a massive bargain as well based on what we saw DJ Moore do last year. But I like how you picked Keenan Allen. I think a lot of people want to pick Caleb Williams here, but of course, I said veteran, so you could have gone Caleb on this one,
Right.
but there's a chance that Caleb Williams can just support everybody. And this offense goes nuclear and he challenges for all-time records on the Bears. I think he's that talented.
Which isn't hard. I mean,
29 touchdown passes, right?
29 touchdowns and 4,000 yards immediately makes him the best quarterback in Bears history.
That you can absolutely see it. So let's talk about offenses. Take a step back, because a lot of times this time of year when we're doing fantasy content, we concentrate on the players and the positions and ranking and targeting. But if we take a bird's eye view and we can simply identify those breakout offenses, we could end up getting ADP wins from like 5 guys. You see it every year. Last year, Detroit, Zamir Gibbs, massive winner. Sam Laporta, massive winner. Jared Goff, a winner. Amon-Ra St. Brown, a winner. The years before, 2 years ago, was the Miami year. Tyreek, Jalen Waddle, both exploded, both at ADP. Jacksonville that year, a bunch of guys beat at ADP. It happens every single year. Who's an offense right now that you think could take a huge step forward, or simply an offense that's just underrated?
So I think the obvious ones here are Atlanta.
Yeah.
We know that this team has been a quarterback away for years, and they finally got their quarterback. And guess what? If Kirk Cousins isn't their quarterback, they've got Michael Penix to fall back on. Like, they kind of doubled their chances of hitting on a quarterback this year. So I think that's the obvious answer. So I won't talk about that too much. I think Chicago is the other obvious answer. They completely overhauled their offense, bringing in a generational prospect at quarterback, adding Keenan Allen, adding DeAndre Swift. It's easy to say them taking that huge step forward. So let me get a little bit deeper, just one that maybe we aren't thinking about quite as much, and that's Tennessee. Tennessee has invested so much in the offense this year, and they were not great last year. And I think a lot of people look at the subtraction of Derrick Henry and kind of take that as the biggest takeaway. But I think that what they have in Tajay Spears and then bringing in a young and now healthy Tony Pollard, I don't think they're going to lose a ton in the run game. Calvin Ridley, his skill set pairs so perfectly with what DeAndre Hopkins does, where DeAndre Hopkins is that possession guy, kind of working 10 yards out and near the line of scrimmage. Calvin Ridley can get a little bit deeper downfield, adding Tyler Boyd to play in the slot as well. Obviously, this all hinges on Will Levis, and we saw Will Levis flash last year, but he wasn't really able to put together a full productive season, but they have put him in a best case scenario to succeed this year. So again, I think Atlanta, Chicago, maybe even Indianapolis are kind of some of the chalky responses here. But Tennessee is an offense that I find myself investing in. And maybe I could be wrong, but they're cheap enough that I'm willing to take the chance.
Yeah, and I think you nailed it with the cheap enough. The Tony Pollard signing made Tajay Spears cheap. It also kind of made Tony Pollard cheap. There's chances he would have been drafted higher. Wide receiver wise, Calvin Ridley has this potential role where Callahan's saying he's going to be in the Jamar Chase role. They gave him this enormous contract and he's still cheap. DeAndre Hopkins, incredibly cheap. So I'm with you. I don't think there's and then obviously Will Levis is like quarterback 25 on Underdog. So you're talking about an offense that's completely trying to change their style. They draft J.C. Latham. They kind of shore up the offensive line, but it's like we're going away from Derrick Henry and we're going to pass the ball an absolute ton, for better or for worse. So we'll see how it goes. But stylistically, I think you're right. And sometimes an offense can be sort of mediocre, but if they run enough plays, then they're going to be fantasy friendly. And I think there's a chance that with the Callahan system, they could be one of those teams where scoring wise, they were like middle of the pack, but plays per game, they're towards the top. So we'll see how that goes. It's a big leap of faith and certainly a philosophical change. We're going to take.
I think the big fear, of course, is that Will Levis just stinks, and that's in the range of possibilities. But this could be one of those offenses that we look back and say, look at all the investments they made this offseason. We saw him add Brian Callahan. Why didn't we see this coming?
Mason Rudolph as the as the backup? Do you think like he'd have to fall completely flat on his face? You could see some Mason Rudolph. I doubt it happens. I think that they're committed to at least trying to give Will Levis every opportunity. And if they fall flat on their face, they're going to draft a quarterback next year. So we'll see how that goes. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, Dave and I are going to talk about players that are breakout players who are going to beat their ADP and going to post their first significant, huge fantasy seasons. We'll be right back.
This episode is brought to you by Player Profiler, the Dynasty Deluxe package. The rankings are the best in the industry. It includes strategy mode where you can say, hey, change the rankings to be win now. Oh, change the rankings to be productive struggle. There's also a draft planner to help to strategize where you should take players because the draft planner also includes ADP. There's a trade finder where we look up on My Fantasy League and we see trades that are done, including a particular player. Then there's a trade analyzer where you can plug in draft picks, players, and we assign a lifetime value to draft picks out 5 years. The best thing about our trade analyzer, it can't be gamed with volume. And there's mock draft data to see right now what's the market for player X versus player Y, including in the fall when very few mock drafts are happening. And our Dynasty guide, the Dynasty Dominator, would cost you $10 on Amazon, but you get it for free with Dynasty Deluxe, and you get our rookie guide for free, a $25 value. So you get all of that for $45. I mean, it's a great deal.
Welcome back to Press Coverage. Theo Gremminger with Dave Kluge. And this time of year, people will qualify things like sleeper and breakout. They can kind of be all over the place in how you view them. For me, a breakout is when a player can reach a certain new level. It could be a guy that's maybe given us a couple of wide receiver 3 seasons and then finally breaks into like wide receiver 1 range. It could be potentially a rookie. There's different ways to kind of qualify breakout. How do you qualify something like breakout? Is there a official term here? Is it sort of like an eye of the beholder thing, Dave?
I think it's a guy who has his best year ever. And I'm going to talk about a couple rookies, which are just completely cheating because, of course, these guys are going to break out. So I've got some rookies I'm going to talk about, some veterans that I can talk about as well. But when I'm talking about a rookie breakout, I'm talking about a guy who is just going to take fantasy by storm, be a huge points compiler, a guy that is going to help people win leagues. And when I'm talking about a veteran as a breakout player, I'm talking about a guy who's going to put up a career best in whether it be receiving yards, passing yards, rushing yards, fantasy points, just a guy who can take that step forward that we haven't seen before.
Yeah, and we left like Marvin Harrison Jr. out of the way. Like a couple of the obvious guys, a couple of these guys are a little less obvious. A couple of them are pretty obvious. A couple of them are steaming up. But like when we compared notes here, I was actually pretty happy with some of Dave's choices here. And I think that when you simply look at ADP, we're going to be referencing underdog best ball ADP. But a lot of times the underdog market is very reflective of what you're going to see, on NFFC, FFPC high stakes, as well as like sleeper or Yahoo leagues. It remains relatively stagnant, especially at the top. Some guys can float around throughout the summer, but for the most part, I think that the underdog market does a really good job of letting us know where we're going to have to be taking these guys for the most part. So why don't you start us out? Give us one of the rookies, Dave.
All right. This is a guy I've talked about a lot, and I don't know why he's getting so suppressed in value right now. I think it's because there was this narrative going around that this running back class sucked. And then we got a guy who is a very good running back who was drafted into a good situation and got good draft capital, and everybody still just held on to their prior notions that this, running back class sucks. And I'm talking about Jonathan Brooks, of course, coming off the ACL tear, so there is some concern there. This guy he's a good football player. And right now he's getting drafted, in like rounds 8 and 9 of fantasy drafts. I think he should be a round 3-4 player, especially if we're talking about weighted opportunities at the end of the season when those games matter so much more. A week 1 matchup isn't nearly as valuable as a week 14 matchup. And there's no reason to believe that Jonathan Brooks isn't going to be near 100% by the end of the season. Even coming off of the ACL tear, he was still drafted as this class's RB1. And I've heard the argument that this is a crowded running back room, and that's crazy to me. I mean, Miles Sanders was terrible. Chuba Hubbard was given like 25 opportunities per game and was stumbling for like 48 scoreless yards every single week. He was terrible as well. Now we're looking at Dave Canales taking over as the offensive coordinator, a guy who has historically really just given all of the touches to one back. We saw it last year with Rachaad White. And I think that he can help this whole offense get better, but more specifically, Jonathan Brooks. And Jonathan Brooks is, I mean, he does everything you want to see from a running back. I was looking at PFF, and out of 48 qualifying Power 5 running backs, Jonathan Brooks was graded as their best rusher and their best receiver. But the thing that really jumped out to me is a breakaway run, 15 plus yards on a rushing attempt. He did that on 43% of his carries last year. That is just insane. 43% of his touches were going 15 plus yards. This guy has burst. He's got tackle breaking abilities. He can catch the ball out of the backfield. I think the reason people are down on him is because of this pre-draft narrative that all of these running backs were bad. But I think Jonathan Brooks is good. I think the Panthers think he's good, and he's going to get a huge opportunity in the second half of the season.
Yeah, I'm on this running back class as a whole. I think you nailed it, that the hive mind sort of listen to everything with this class is so bad. We've had like 12 straight years with a rookie finishing inside of the top 20 scores at the running back position. Yep. It's going to happen this year. Whether it's Jonathan Brooks or one of these other guys, it could be a contingent play, a guy like a Marshawn Lloyd if a Josh Jacobs goes down. But this class has enough guys with utility. And I love that you brought up Dave Canales. Rachaad White, 322 touches last year.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of guys could cook with 322 touches, but Jonathan Brooks, he profiles as a 3-down back, which is very rare. And also this offense, the fact that they took Brooks in the second round, I think they want to protect Bryce Young. And I think the focal point of the offense will be very clear by the end of the year that it's Jonathan Brooks. I think him and Trey Benson, when we're drafting in underdog or on underdog like next year, I think they're both going to be like second round picks, third round picks. They'll be steamed up inside the top 30 picks because both these guys are going to like ascend throughout the year. So I'll stay at the running back position, and I'll go a little less exciting, but a guy who is in a really, really great opportunity. It's a guy that I'd say is in a top 10 offense, and it was a player that actually had a lot of attention in free agency. And last year we saw this player have a lot of usable weeks. Through the first 6 weeks of the season, this player was giving us RB1 numbers, and that's Zach Moss. And it seems sort of unexciting to talk about Zach Moss, but Zach Moss's competition is Chase Brown, who's an explosive player, a smaller player, a guy that I think profiles as more of a let's call him Samaje Perine on steroids in the Cincinnati offense. Whereas Zach Moss, I think, is going to get a pretty heavy workload. I think he's going to be the goal line back. And last year we saw him catch 27 passes. He had nearly 1,000 combined yards in Indianapolis last year. He flashed. And I think what's interesting is he had a lot of attention in the free agent market. Dallas tried to sign him, but he signs with Cincinnati. I think they have a plan. They completely ignored running back in the NFL draft. They're going with Zach Moss. They're going with Chase Brown. And I think drafters just have a little trouble hitting the button on Zach Moss. Zach Moss right now is running back 28. I think he finishes about 10 spots higher. I think he finishes inside of the top 20 scores at the running back position. Call it like running back 18, 19, 20 range. And you're able to get him right now an underdog at the 94th overall selection. Zach Moss. It's not exciting, but I think structurally he allows you to go hero RB, and he allows you to kind of sit back, let other people take shots at the running back position, and go Zach Moss.
Yeah, I love Zach Moss, and I actually just wrapped up a Best Ball Mania draft where Justin Herzig and I were both really hoping Zach Moss was going to fall to us and got sniped by one pick, and we talked about it. I mean, I think the biggest hangup people have with Zach Moss is oh, well, he's not that efficient. It's we just saw Joe Mixon churning out RB1 season year after year after year in Cincinnati on terrible efficiency. And Zach Moss was actually more efficient last year than Joe Mixon was. I think that his skill set matches up really well with the run game here. And it's just going to be an opportunity thing. I like Chase Brown as well as a really late dart throw for his big play upside. But you hit the nail on the head. All of the goal line work, and there's going to be a lot of it in Cincinnati, is going to Zach Moss. He's a guy that can easily outperform his ADP.
And it seems like a guy who's been in the league forever, but he's 26.
Yeah.
So it's sort of like slow out the gate, but Zach Moss, not a lot of tread on the tires, and was very successful last year in sort of the nuts position. And I like first of all, I like being on the same side as Justin Herzig in my best ball process. Not, guys won a couple of drafts every now and then. But I like the idea of the double tap with Moss and Brown, specifically in best ball, because I think that those guys collectively, you can punt RB2, draft those guys, and you have a built-in RB2. I think it's a really nice way of playing it in best ball. Give us your next breakout, Dave.
I'll go with another rookie here. I'm doing 2 rookies and 2 veterans, and this one's chalky and it's obvious, but the people need to hear it because I have seen this guy fall into like 105 in dynasty drafts. He's still getting valued as QB 13 on Underdog. This is my QB 8 on the year, and I feel like that is too low for him. Like I want to move him even higher. Jaden Daniels has all the opportunity in the world to just have like a record-breaking rookie season from a fantasy production standpoint. He had 1,134 yards rushing last year in college. He led the entire NCAA in rushing yards per attempt. And there's this misconception that he can just rush the ball, and that could be further from the truth. Like he is a great thrower as well. We're not talking about Joe Milton or Kellen Mond here. We're talking about a guy who won a Heisman largely because of his passing abilities. And out of 197 Power 5 quarterbacks last year, he was first in offensive grade. He was first in rushing grade. We expect both of those, but he was third in passing grade. I mean, this is a phenomenal passer that steps into a position where he's got Terry McLaurin, Jahan Dotson, Austin Eckler, Brian Robinson, Zach Ertz, Ben Sinnott. Like they just have so many weapons here in Washington. He's almost in a can't fail position. And the big thing that I think people are scared of with Jaden Daniels is the pressure to sack ratio. But the way I look at it, pressure to sack ratio isn't going to impact his 2024 outcome. That's something that might be a concern years down the road. It doesn't insulate his longevity. And we've seen guys like Zach Wilson and Justin Fields flame out after a few years because they can't get the sacks under control. But regardless, he's going to be starting this year as long as he's healthy. Like they're not going to bench him if he's getting sacked. They've invested the premium draft capital in him. This is one of the few guys that has 1,000 rushing yards in his range of outcomes at the quarterback position. Like I said, he's my QB 8. It wouldn't surprise me one bit to see him finish as a top 3 quarterback in fantasy this year.
I think you nailed it. Like Jaden Daniels, it's the upside is so immense, but also when you draft him around quarterback 13 with that rushing upside, if he's not as efficient a passer as we think he could be, he still has that baked in. What's the rushing floor here? 750 floor and ceiling for sure.
Yeah.
But I think like even if he's not as good a rusher as we think, he's still going to rush for 700 plus yards, which is crazy. And I think the upside would be kind of messing around with the record rushing yards in NFL history at the quarterback position. This is a guy that had 2,000 rushing yards in 2 seasons in the SEC, his last 2 years of LSU. You brought up the efficiency. You rarely see quarterbacks who pass for 40 touchdowns in a college year not throw some picks. Like the touchdown interception ratio, outstanding. You're talking about the Heisman Trophy winner, and also a franchise that's just been starving for this kind of a face to the franchise ever since they lost RG3 early in his career to injuries. So I love Jaden Daniels. He's been an easy click on Underdog, especially as your QB2. It's almost like a cheat code to have him as your QB2, and you're able to stack him as well. You bring up the weapons. I think it's a little bit underrated. The McCaffrey and Sinnott selections were very, very smart. McLaurin also is a guy that we've sort of been waiting around for years for kind of that season. He could be like DJ Moore was last year in Chicago, that just finally breaks out, finally gives us a wide receiver 1 season. So love that one. So I love that you give us the 2 rookies. I didn't do any rookies. People hear me talk rookies all the time here.
I cheated talking about it's easy to talk about rookies being breakouts.
You don't have it. Yeah, it's okay though. It's okay, Dave. We're going to allow it. There's very, very sharp takes. Jonathan Brooks, though, what a value he is. Again, really nice pick there.
I think both of these guys, I think at this point in the offseason, people just get scared off drafting rookies because of the unknown. I think both of these guys are going to start to climb once training camp opens. You're going to see, the Carolina Panthers on Twitter. They're going to tweet out a clip of Jonathan Brooks cutting around a cone, and everybody's going to say, "Oh, that knee looks healthy," and he's going to shoot up 2 rounds in ADP. There's going to be a clip of Jaden Daniels juking a defender, throwing a pass deep downfield, whatever it is. So I think if you're doing volume drafting throughout the offseason, it's just a good process to draft these guys now because this is the cheapest they're going to be. They are only going to go up in ADP from this point.
Agreed. And another guy that I think is going to go up in ADP is Zamir White. And Zamir White's my next player here. And this is sort of everybody kind of likes Zamir White. And Zamir White's actually steamed up to RB21, which seems excessively high for a guy whose sample size is 4 games. But Zamir White is set to have a massive volume year. His running back competition is Alexander Madison and Dylan Lobby. He plays for Antonio Pierce, who is a coach that wants to get the running backs involved early and often, wants to run the ball. This is set up so well for Zamir White. Zamir White's a guy where we've had to wait and wait and wait. He had steam in Dynasty rookie drafts as a rookie, like out of Georgia. This was a guy who was one of the best high school recruits in the country, played for the Georgia Bulldogs national championship team, injured often, but again, a sterling profile, 4th-round pick, immediately sort of gets that RB2 job and then gets 0 opportunities, 0. And we waited and we waited and waited. And then last year, we finally got the chance for him to play, and he proceeds to give us 17.5, 14.5, 15.5, and then 13 PPR points. Every single week he started last year, he was RB20 or better. I think this year he has a chance to have this sort of out of nowhere, ugly RB1 season. His volume will be similar to what Josh Jacobs had. I don't think his ceiling is quite there with Jacobs. I think Madison and Lobby could be a little bit annoying in terms of the receptions, but in terms of volume, Zamir White's going to have it. And I think that this Las Vegas offense is a little bit underrated. The weapons with Brock Bowers, Devontae Adams, a little bit of Minshew gunslinging. I think Zamir White's going to have plenty of opportunities to win on volume. And also, I think he's pretty good. He's got the size, the athleticism, and he's 24 and a half years old. I think Zamir White potentially an RB1 this year.
Yeah, I don't know if you listened to the show that I did on Monday with JJ Zachariason, but pretty much everything you just said about Zamir White, I said about Zamir White on Monday, and we were covering sleepers. And Zamir White is one of my favorite targets as well. I don't know if you mentioned it, but 96th percentile size adjusted speed score. But he's also like a thumper. Like he can run between the tackles, he can run through defenders, and he still has the speed to break off big plays. We haven't seen him catch a ton of passes in his career, but he does have shockingly soft hands as well. But what jumps out to me is if like you go back and watch the last 4 games of the season last year, where, like you said, Zamir White was getting like 25 opportunities and 115 yards per game. He didn't look any different than Josh Jacobs. Like if I didn't have my glasses on and I was watching that game, I think that was just Josh Jacobs out on the field. Like that offense didn't miss a beat. And now I think with them actually making a good move at quarterback, bringing in Gardner Minshew instead of Aiden O'Connell, the entire offense is going to be better. So I am way in on Zamir White. You don't have to sell me.
Yeah, and we love when the backup is sort of a like for like replacement where we don't really have to think about it. Zamir White, we've just been waiting on. The fact that Las Vegas didn't draft a running back on day 2, if they were worried about Zamir White, they would have drafted somebody earlier on in the draft, and they certainly would have brought in somebody, I think, that profiled a little bit better than Alexander Madison. So we're both there. Give us one of your other veterans here. Go off the rookie path.
So this one, I'm setting a pretty high ceiling for because he already went for 1,000 yards his rookie year, but I think this is the year where everything finally comes together for Kyle Pitts. And what's the definition of insanity, Theo? Doing the same thing over and over again? And expecting
we're back.
Results?
We're back, Dave. We're back.
I'm going back. I don't care, man. I'm going back for Kyle Pitts again this year, and it's just so easy to make a case for him. You know, he looked bad last year, but he was coming off an MCL and a PCL injury early in the season. Like he couldn't even get out of his breaks. You'd see him trying to run a route and he would just like collapse. Like he was clearly not at his best health last year. Despite that, he still led all tight ends in air yards, air yard share, target depth. Now he gets a huge upgrade at quarterback. You know, I kind of talked about this earlier, whether it's Kirk Cousins or Michael Penix. It can't be worse than the Desmond Ridder, Marcus Mariota, Taylor Heineke trio that they've been rolling out for the last few years here. And he's just 23 years old. Like we've been talking about this guy for 4 years now, and he is just 23 years old, youngest tight end to ever have a 1,000-yard season, younger than Trey McBride, younger than Dalton Kincaid. He still has so much room to grow at the position. So despite getting burned last year and getting burned the year before, I'm going back again because I think talent is there for Kyle Pitts, and the situation is just going to be so much better.
Once I thought I was out, they pulled me back in, and I'm with you on Kyle Pitts. I mean, You nailed it. The guy's 23 years old. We've already seen a 1,000-yard season. We've already seen a 100-target season. Like, tight ends don't get 100 targets. You can count every year on one hand, usually, the amount of tight ends that get that sort of target volume. We've already seen that. Now he goes back to a quarterback who's a little more similar to the success he had under Matt Ryan with Kirk Cousins, and a huge upgrade for them. And even if Kirk Cousins is unhealthy, he gets a top 10 draft pick in Michael Penix. So Kyle Pitts, I completely agree with you. And I'm staying with Atlanta. And I'm going to go with a guy that's actually way more expensive than Kyle Pitts. But it's sort of like the writings on the wall that this is Drake London season. Drake London is younger than Pitts. Drake London is still only 22 years old, which is younger than Xavier Legette, younger than Ricky Pearsall, younger than a number of the wide receivers people are drafting right now in rookie drafts. Drake London's given us 2 seasons where we can absolutely see the talent. We can see sort of the alpha. And now it's a complete cultural shift in Atlanta. Kirk Cousins, and you also get the Zach Robinson offense. I think that Atlanta, with Drake London, this could be like a top 5 wide receiver season if it all breaks well. And I think even if it doesn't break well, you're talking about a guy that's 240 PPR points. Like, wide receiver 1 range is absolutely there for him. Darnell Mooney across from him, I do not think is going to sap away targets. London has the talent. We've also seen Kirk Cousins continually elevate wide receivers. Now, he's not Justin Jefferson, but Adam Thielen, Stephon Diggs, you're talking about some of the best. Even back in Washington, Kirk Cousins was elevating certain wide receivers. And TJ Hawkinson last year puts up a monster season. Jordan Addison had some big games with Cousins. Cousins is going to get the best out of Drake London. Drake London right now costs you an early 2nd-round pick. I think by the time that we draft in like some of the high stakes wide receiver heavy formats in August and September, you're talking about a 1-2 turn guy. I think he's going to be there. I think people are going to be more and more excited on London as the summer moves along.
Yeah, he's already going at that 1-2 turn in underdog, and I'm willing to take the risk. I will say, like, from a dynasty standpoint, I just kind of wrote an article about a little bit of a buyer beware here, because I think if he doesn't put it together this year, you're going to see that just the bottom fall out from under his value, and it's going to be tough to recoup that.
But I flipped him twice in Dynasty.
There.
I'll give like full disclosure here. Yeah. I told, like, we talked like press coverage. I'll try to keep it like best ball and no. Yeah. But I'm always got my Dynasty hat on, as do you, Dave. But I flipped him twice in Dynasty because I do think there is an argument that if it doesn't happen this year, like we think it could happen, this is the peak value Drake London. And even if he gives you like wide receiver 12 and just doesn't like completely go nuclear, he's still not going to be worth more than he is right now in Dynasty startups. So I flipped him twice. I had him in one trade that ended up getting me Marvin Harrison Jr. It was like sort of a package deal for Marvin Harrison Jr. London was part of it. And then I traded him basically on a structural trade. It was London as the biggest piece of a package for a package with Breece Hall. So I went wide receiver, running back, classic, go for it, push the chips in type deal. So I'm with you on Dynasty, but purely from a redraft perspective, I think this is the year.
It's so easy to envision the ceiling. Yeah, I'm completely with you, and I don't have any qualms about drafting him where he is. Another guy that has a very wide range of outcomes, but the upside is so high. The fact, like the opportunity that he can crack into the top 3, top 5 wide receivers, that I'm willing to draft him in round 2, even with the risk.
So you give us your final breakout player, the guy you're targeting, and also a wide receiver.
Yeah, I'll try to keep this one succinct. I don't have like bullet points to talk about this guy. I just wrote a 2,000-word article on him, so I'll try my best to cram everything that I just dug up on this player into a quick little soundbite here. But Marquise Brown is a guy that I've just been like infatuated with since he came into the league, and it's so easy to make up excuses. He came into the league with a Liz Frank injury. Didn't do much his rookie season, and then we saw elite peripherals his next 2 years in Baltimore. But in those years, Lamar Jackson was not throwing the ball much at all. So we saw him drawing targets. We saw him drawing valuable targets deep downfield and near the red zone. We saw him making plays after the catch, but the overall production wasn't there because there just wasn't a big passing pie in Baltimore. Then he moves to Arizona, and we see this little flash when DeAndre Hopkins was suspended, and we saw Marquise Brown with a good quarterback at the start of the 2022 season. And over that first 6-week stretch in Arizona, he was the wide receiver 5 in fantasy scoring. I mean, he was doing all the things that he did in Baltimore, but on twice as much volume, and he was just crushing it in fantasy. And then he got hurt. And then going into 2023, you can make more excuses. You know, it was Clayton Tune, it was Josh Dobbs, it was Kyler Murray coming back from the injury. And by the time Kyler Murray came back, Marquise Brown had a foot injury of his own, and he wasn't himself. But really what it comes down to for me, and again, I'm trying to make this as quick as possible, but when you look at the Chiefs wide receiver room, since they lost Tyreek Hill, there has been such a delineation in how they use the receivers. Last year, every single wide receiver either had a sub 10 ADOT or a plus 17 ADOT. That's crazy. They didn't have a single receiver that had an average target depth between 10 and 17 yards. You look, Kadarius Toney and Rashee Rice were the second and third lowest ADOTs in the league. And then you have MVS and Justin Watson on the opposite end of the spectrum with the fourth and fifth highest ADOTs in the league. So I think what they're doing is they're looking for a guy that can be that Tyreek Hill type player, that can win deep, that can win short, that can win outside, that can win across the middle, that can do things after the catch, that can catch balls deep downfield. And I think what they did is they doubled their chances by getting that player this year by 1, signing Marquise Brown, and 2, drafting Xavier Worthy. One of these guys is going to be a breakout this year. And I'm putting my chips on Marquise Brown because we've already seen him flash at the NFL level. So that's it for me, is that the Chiefs have desperately been looking for this Tyreek Hill replacement. I think they tried with Kadarius Toney. They tried with Sky Moore. They've tried with so many players, and they're trying again with Marquise Brown. But he's a guy that we've seen show success at the NFL level, and I think he could finally have that huge breakout and be a 1,400-yard receiver with Kansas City.
Yeah, I love that. It's sort of a betting on himself deal that he took as well. You know, he could make a lot of money off of this deal, sort of like what we saw last year with Calvin Ridley, a single season in Jacksonville. And I think Ridley gives you that wide receiver 18 season. I think that Hollywood Brown, I'm not sure if he'll get to wide receiver 1 land, but I think that the chances of him being a wide receiver 2, and right now you're paying like wide receiver 3 prices, I think it's great. What a difference a year makes. Last year, when we started the season, it was MVS and Justin Watson when Detroit beat Kansas City in the opener. Now it's going to be Xavier Worthy and Hollywood Brown when Kansas City opens up against Baltimore. Love that. Love that for Mahomes as well. And my final guy, I'm going to go everybody's favorite breakout, but I don't think they're wrong. Anthony Richardson. Richardson, 22 years old, second-year player, only played 4 games, got injured last year. Upper body injury, not a lower body injury. So I worry a little bit less about him bouncing back and sort of having the same sort of rushing production. I think that he'll be a little bit more careful with himself this year. But at the end of the day, he's built different. This is a 245-pounder, 6'4", unbelievable speed. We all saw what he did at the combine, but we also saw what he did on the field last year. It's not like I need to draw you a picture, Dave. We saw 2 top 5 weeks, in the first 3 weeks of the season. Richardson was set to challenge for the most fantasy points ever by a rookie quarterback if he would have stayed healthy. Now I think the market is correct on him. He's going off the board around QB 6 on Underdog. But at the end of the day, I think QB 1 overall is in the range of outcomes. The offense has done a lot to put talent on the field there. They re-signed Jonathan Taylor. Josh Downs was a hit. Michael Pittman is back. They draft Adonai Mitchell, sort of one of the bigger, more athletic wide receivers in this class. So everything's lined up well for Anthony Richardson. I think he's going to smash. And when we look back in fantasy, the true breakout years for quarterbacks, a lot of times it's year 2. Jalen Hurts posted a top 5 season, his second year in the league. Lamar Jackson gave us the MVP season, his second year in the league. Mahomes, second year in the league, MVP season. It happens a lot quicker than you think. Anthony Richardson this year, the league winner, arguably at the quarterback position in all formats.
Yeah, and he's efficient, and he's also going to have a lot of volume. So I'm completely with you. Like, finishing as the overall QB1 is well within his range of outcomes. He led the league in fantasy points per dropback last year. And now we're looking at a Shane Steichen offense that is fast paced, so he's going to have a lot of dropbacks. Where he's getting drafted right now, he's one of the easiest guys to draft. I think after this season, we're going to be looking at him in the Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts tier.
Yeah, I love it. I think it's a super exciting guy in redraft, best ball, dynasty startups, go get yourself some Anthony Richardson. To recap our breakouts here, Jonathan Brooks, Kyle Pitts, Hollywood Brown, Jaden Daniels, that's for Dave. And for me, it was Drake London, Anthony Richardson, Zamir White, and Zach Moss. Dave, let everybody know where they can find your work.
Yeah, super simple. Everything's over at Football Guys, youtube.com/fantasy or Football Guys Fantasy. And then you can find all my content. Just follow me on Twitter at Dave Kluge. I share everything I write and everything that I record, so you can see it all there.
Yeah, and look for a little more Dave Kluge in the Roto Underworld this summer. We're going to do some cool stuff. And look for more on press coverage as well. We'll be back next week and every single week this offseason doing what we can to help you crush your leagues this season. Talk to you soon.
Hey, I want to thank you for being part of this broadcast. If you have any thoughts on it, leave a comment. If you enjoyed it, make sure you leave a like. And if you want to see more shows on the Player Profiler channel, subscribe to it. That's how we know you want more.